Thank you for joining us today for It Looks Like You Have a Phone Screen interview. How can I help? Before we start, I have a few quick things to go over. Please take a moment to read our code of conduct. We ask that you be kind and respectful to everyone, including our speakers. We want the reactors to be a place everyone feels welcome. Please ask questions using the live YouTube or Twitch chat. In the chat, we'll be sharing some links to the Reactor Meetup page and monthly newsletter. If you haven't done so already, please check in using our event check-in at aka.ms/reactor check-in with event ID 14632. We will be recording today's session. And towards the end, I will share a link to the Reactor survey. If you have a few minutes, we greatly appreciate your feedback. I will now pass it over to Chloe and Gwen.
It's the most wonderful time of my week. Hi, Gwen.
You know what? When I just listened to our theme song, is like the little like the fadeaway it has at the end is like a slight echo of the instrumental. It's beautiful.
Yeah, it's
Magical.
like a beautiful lead-in to this weekly session that we do. Hello, everyone. Ooh, we've got some folks tuning in live. Let us know where you're joining from. What brings you here? Why are you here? What brings you to this stream today? This is How Can I Help? This particular episode is it looks like you're starting to do phone screens. How can I help? But when episode 6, how you feeling?
Can you believe that? Can you believe that? Goes by so fast.
We've learned so much. We've learned about LinkedIn, which we're y'all. If you're tuning in, we've got some updates. So a little teaser, a little sneak peek while we wait for some folks to join. Last week, we found a new feature on LinkedIn that maybe you've heard of called, what is it? LinkedIn video? LinkedIn story?
Cover story, I believe.
Cover video, cover story. And we understood the assignment. You requested that we go and record videos for our LinkedIn, and we did just that. And we are very excited to show you what we created. But let us know what brings you here today to the stream. We would love to know. This is also kind of open office hours and an Ask Me Anything kind of session. You can watch previous episodes to learn a lot more about us. But I guess to get things rolling, Gwen, tell some of the newbies who you are. What do you do here at Microsoft? What is your life?
What is my life? What a question. Hi, everyone. I'm Gwen, cloud advocate here at Microsoft for about almost 6 months now. Jeez, can you believe that?
It's time flies. Time
Oh my
flies.
goodness. Yeah, so I focus on creating a lot of, I guess, hosting technical events around all things Microsoft and then doing cool things in collabs like this with Chloe. That's pretty much my life, I think.
Yeah. And we've been doing this. Let's see. We have been doing this series now for technically 6 weeks, 5 episodes, because we did have to cancel one episode due to an emergency gas leak in my building. But we've covered all kinds of things. We've covered like cover letters, we've covered resumes, we've covered. Oh, I should say who I am. Hi, everyone. I'm Chloe. I'm the co-host of the show with Gwen. I'm also a cloud advocate on the Next Generation Experiences team here at Microsoft. And I was a recruiter in a previous life. I was an executive assistant. I was a children's birthday party entertainer. I was a camp counselor. I was a Disney store employee. I did it all. But I have learned a lot in my time interviewing and being an interviewer. So this show's really to like help people who are looking to break into the industry. Maybe like a safe space also, not maybe, definitely a safe space to ask any of your questions about the process, or like we've covered a lot of topics, but today's an interesting app. Today is phone screens, Gwen. How do you feel about phone screens?
Uh, you know, I love the amount of information you can give about yourself and you can get about a role during a phone screen. But I'm always like, I feel like at the end, I'm always like, did I answer that correctly? Because you know, it's like your sort of like your first shot as, or like it might be your first and only shot to like, oh, give a good
Yeah.
impression. So I'm always a little nervous around them. Yeah.
I feel like it's interesting, right? Because it's sort of the, have you seen The Wizard of Oz before?
I haven't.
Okay, well, there's like this gatekeeper in The Wizard of Oz, right? And he's like, you can't come into the Emerald City. I feel like the like, for an analogy here, sort of the gatekeeper between you getting that one step closer to the job, like that on site, and the job offer is that phone screen interview, right? Because
Absolutely.
the first line of attack is, okay, I just need to get my resume into the right person's hands so they consider me as a candidate. And that's kind of what we did last week, was like your cover letter, your resume, get that all in a good
LinkedIn.
place. So they're like, I have to call this person
Yeah.
today. So this is kind of like step 2, right? It's like, okay, so you got past the guards of Oz. You're trying to get into Oz, past the gate. And it's like, before you can come in, tell us. So if for folks who haven't seen The Wizard of Oz, Gwen, because your girl has been in The Wizard of Oz twice.
Wow.
One of my favorite movies. Also played Dorothy as a child, of course. But they need to get to the other side of the gate and they have to answer these questions. And it's like, oh, you have the emerald slippers. Like, you can come on the other side of the gate. In this case, it's like, oh, you actually do know about the technology you're talking about. Like, we have to, there's a set of questions typically that this hiring manager or this recruiter or whoever it is you're doing the phone screen with needs to make sure they check off before moving you to the next step. Because I think it's also worth noting, Gwen, that if you do get an on-site somewhere, that's something to celebrate. That's a really big deal.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's not like a guaranteed thing. And you know, I guess they're also like around the phone screen. They're sort of like an interesting. I want to say controversial, but like there are some questions in there that will just always have like different ways of answering, and you don't necessarily have a right way of answering. Honestly, we have a list of questions that we want to go through.
Yes, we have, and I also feel like something worth noting about a phone screen is it's also your first impression.
Absolutely.
And I think it's important to note that when it comes to anybody, be it a recruiter, an office manager, anybody that you interact with in the process, not only are they going to be like, is this person being nice and assessing you for like, hey, is this going to be a good fit for our team? But also you want as a candidate to be like, how are my interactions with these people? Am I picking up any red flags? Is this a place that I want to work? Like, a great example is, if you have a big emphasis on diversity and inclusion, you're like, maybe want to look around and be like, am I being interviewed by people that I feel like I would get along with, that understand, the way that I work? You're also, in addition to being evaluated, you should be evaluating as well.
I think especially when we're getting started, we tend to forget about that.
Yeah.
And then we're gonna touch upon this when we go through the questions, but being prepared for a phone screen interview to also ask questions and having some questions prepped beforehand, that's gonna go a long way. So we'll get to that, but just
that's my favorite part. What questions do you have for me? Because as an interviewer, I think that's a really fun exercise, because that's sort of like the only pre-prep you can do other than like practicing talking about yourself.
Right.
And you can really tell a lot about what the person is thinking about with the job and what is important to them through the questions that they ask. And that can be like, hey, tell me a little bit about the culture of working here. Or the question can be like, tell me how you measured success here. Like, there's so many things that you maybe even learned from previous jobs. You're like, you know what? I never want to work at a company again that does X. Do you guys do X?
Correct.
So yeah. Ooh, we've got people in the chat. Ola Boris,
Love it.
welcome.
Hola.
Let's see. We've got, okay, here's Clifton says, I was laid off from my job in October last year after 8 years. Oh no. I have a new job now, but job hunting was completely different from when I last searched in 2012. I can imagine.
Yeah, the change, especially with COVID, like the changes that have happened.
Yeah.
Goodness.
I don't think I did too well in some of the phone/Zoom interviews, so pointers would be awesome. Thank you, too. Ooh, yes. Especially, that's interesting. I'm really glad that you brought that up, Clifton, because we're also in an era where most on-sites are not on-site. They're remote. So that's
Remote
definitely
site.
something we'll dive into. But before we do, Gwen, I think it's time. So, okay, if you haven't joined us on our previous episodes, we gave ourselves some homework from the previous app. You can check out all the links at, we've got them all over the place here, aka.ms/how can we help you. You can check out the previous videos there. And we found out that LinkedIn had this feature. And it's kind of like, okay, I want to get the actual name of it right, because you access it through your phone to upload it.
I'm pretty sure it's Cover Story.
Cover Story? I think you're right.
Which might be a play on cover letter, so interesting.
Ooh, yes.
Ooh, marketing.
Okay,
okay,
marketing. So you'll see that on my LinkedIn here, I've got this orange circle around my picture, and that's not because my hair is orange. That is because I uploaded a cover story. And you can upload them through your phone. Gwen, I think you should start. I think you have a very good, cool, professional one. And let's show the incredible cinematography that you achieved.
Let me pull up my LinkedIn.
I'm going to pull up mine as well. And for anybody in the chat, let us know if you've experimented with this feature, because this was our first time playing with it. So I guess we're kind of like first ones playing with this. We're giving our full report here. I full disclosure, created mine in an Instagram video because I wanted it to have emojis and GIFs and things like that. But we've got some comments here. Okay. Alex says, I'm trying to figure out why I kept failing my phone screen in my first interview for cloud solution architect roles. Okay, interesting. So it sounds like, Alex, you're getting to the phone screen, but you're not getting past that. So if you haven't watched our previous episode, okay, don't click off of this video, because this video is fun and we want you to stay here. But after this episode, I would recommend watching, was it our last video, Gwen, where we were talking about kind of giving your personal story, your pitch, so to speak, kind of like
I think that was cover letter.
Cover letter. Yeah. I would say make sure that you're very efficiently, because I would say, Gwen, let me know if this has been the case with you. For most phone screens, it's sort of the same rubric, I would say, for conversations. They're typically going to ask, say, tell me about yourself, like what brings you to interview at blank. they're going to ask you, do you have any questions for us? So I always kind of prepare a question or two. I'm trying to think, other than that, what is typically asked in a phone screen. I feel like maybe a little bit about the technology or the role that you're applying for as well, some role specific things.
Yeah, something uh, like what your current role is, what you currently do. I've been asked as well, like, why are you looking to leave your current role or company? What are you looking for in your next role? Here's a topic that we're probably going to dive into a little bit more. Salary requirements, always asked.
Yes.
Well, in this case, it might be different. Like in these times, it might be different. But like relocation, people ask that too. Like start dates. Do you have any questions, like you mentioned? Oh, and here's another one as well that might be a little. We'll have some back and forth, but if you're interviewing at any other companies, been asked that as well.
That would like help expedite the process if you have like competing offers and things like that. Yeah, I think also just being prepared. Like, for example, it sounds like, in this case, Alex, you said you're interviewing for a cloud solution architect role. Like, I always kind of refresh myself in the basics, even though I know that I know them, of just like how to speak to some of the core concepts of my job. So like as a developer advocate or evangelist, that's like, okay, how do I think through a piece of content start to finish? Maybe for, a cloud solution architect, that's something like, how do I think through a project and like work with stakeholders? Like kind of thinking ahead of like 2 to 3 stories that you can kind of speak to your hands-on experience, or if it's your first time in the role, speaking to other experiences. Gwen, you can probably speak to that, coming from a non-traditional background into a role like this. Like, what kind of stories did you try to tell in those?
Yeah, I guess for like more of a specific cloud role, having, like you mentioned, I would say like 2 to 3 projects that you know in and out, in terms of like being able to explain like why you chose like certain, why you made certain decisions. With like you mentioned, the phone screen, it's not necessarily sort of trying to prove your technical expertise, because the person who is on the other end isn't necessarily on your team, or knows much about like the role like is in the role, right? It's usually like an HR person for a phone screen, or perhaps a hiring manager. Sometimes depends on the company, but they definitely will ask you like sort of high level concepts. And the thing is, like when you're in a role for a while, you sort of take those things for granted. So when you sit down and like, oh, how do I, what a thing is, but you sort of can't like explain it.
Yeah.
So like practicing, you like understanding like your concept of like, for example, for cloud, like your auto scaling, what's elasticity, what is redundancy, what is all these kinds of things. Like, of course you know them and you take it for granted day by day, but you got to sit down, you got to know how to confidently be able to explain these things, because remember, this is a new job, you're new to everyone there.
My tip to all the folks that are coming out of boot camp, self-taught, people that I mentor, is for junior roles. I know this sounds so silly and you know all of it, but review just like how an HTTP request works. Like we all just kind of take it for granted, right? But like that can often be an interview question for junior roles. Like walk me through what happens with each part of this URL here, or even just like, as you get more senior in career, you're going to start reviewing things like reverse system design and leak code, always leak code all the time. But since I may not be here for the whiteboarding episode, I think it's worth saying that like thinking about even just, OOVN, like solutions, kind of these core concepts of like, okay, this is a great project that you built. How could you have built it with more storage efficiency? Or why did you choose to use Azure over this product, for example? And being able to kind of speak to those different pieces and technologies, those are really the conversations that they want to have. They want to know, can this person collaborate? Can I talk through and problem solve with this person? So yeah, couldn't agree more. Just kind of reviewing those. It seems basic, but those like fundamental core basics of like, what do I do in my role?
Yeah, keep in mind that the phone screen is a test of your communication ability, right? Like over everything. Like you'll have your time to sort of prove or showcase your technical skills and everything, but your ability to communicate is the number one thing being tested on a phone screen interview.
And I would say even with whiteboarding, because I
true.
was shocked at some points as a junior that I remember my first Google interview ever. I cried afterwards. I was like, oh my God, I didn't like solve. And I moved on. Like I moved on to the next one, and then I did really well on the whiteboarding for that one. And like, it just sometimes they really just want to hear, how can they talk through this problem? What are they thinking? What are their solutions? Because, who amongst us who's whiteboarded like actually feels like that's a good representation of our day-to-day as devs. But oh my gosh, this is so cool. Gwen, look, I'm going to share my screen. I opened up LinkedIn and I'm on your page, and this is so meta, not Facebook meta, just like meta the concept. Here's us, because we're streaming live. Look, it looks like we're looking at your head, the top of your head. And I'm going to share my sound on here. I can share your video. This is a very huge moment of the show. Okay, share screen. I'm going to share with audio. Okay, here we go. I'm going to play the vid. So this is Gwen's LinkedIn video action.
Publishing data to customers via Signal R. Front end is reloading the data. I know I had some messages like, Mark, we got to do something. Today we have cross-application communication with Azure Q Storage. My errors always happen with specifying directories. Today we're going to talk about how I landed my job at Microsoft. The CLI we can, sorry, I just got lost looking at a question that we have in the chat. This is what went wrong, and maybe we can approach it this way. Maybe you can try this, but so I have like a next step after that. That's constructive feedback. And then over here it says Microsoft. Pretty cool, huh?
That's so cute. I love it. Oh my gosh. Should I join us live? That's really cute. I love that too, because it's very candid and it's not just like you talking through technology. It's like different clips from different things. And I love that you end on the Microsoft thing. That's so cute. I say in my Microsoft shirt.
Yeah, I think the cool thing I realized about this, I was trying to find other people's examples. And then I realized, like, I'm just going to do what feels right here. Because I was at the beginning, I was like, all right, let me script something. Hi, my name is Gwen, holding up the phone recording. But I'm like, nah, I'm just going to like grab clips of the stuff that I already do and put it together and let the work speak for itself.
I love that. Okay, so I debated with mine. And
I love yours, by the way. Because it's very you. It's like the most you that you could be.
It is very me. Oh, look, this is like pictured, recursive show. Okay. So if you go to my profile, so wait, no spoilers, no spoilers. Okay, I'm gonna scroll down. Okay, so what I was thinking about, what I wanted to put in this video, because I'm not like actively job searching. I'm not like, I wanted to get a couple things across in my profile, and that is, hello, welcome to my profile. And I considered being like, hey, I only add people on here that I know, because that is true. As far as like how I personally use LinkedIn, I tend to just add people and acquaintances that I've actually worked with in real life versus just kind of people who are like, hey, I saw your talk. I like to at least have shaken a hand, or in this era, winked through a screen, I guess is the equivalent of that. So mine is very authentic to me, and I'm really just getting a main point across that I think will speak for itself. So here we go. Wait, why can't I watch mine?
Click on view, or if you click on yours, view or edit.
View. Okay.
Yeah.
View. Okay, so as you can see, this says, welcome to my LinkedIn. DM with any questions that aren't covered in my profile. And I think that's what I wanted to accomplish from this. I didn't feel like I needed to advertise anything. I just wanted to be like, hey, if you want to know what my first job was ever, which was the Disney store, and go through a living, breathing history of every single job I ever had, welcome to this page. But I love, what I love about yours, Gwen, is that it feels very like, I don't know, it's just like such a good glimpse into what you do as a day-to-day thing. Mine feels more like comedy. I almost made it a Rickroll. But I think also I'm not using this to network currently, I would say. I say I use it for my existing network, but I really like yours. I kind of want to do a little, what do they call that? A demo reel, a little clip reel is very cute.
Yeah, I took your I think you mentioned this like previously, like actors will put together something similar.
Yes. A demo reel. It'll be that like them in a commercial, or them. Maybe I should think of mine. I like this. Maybe finding some of my favorite talks and being like,
I feel
I'll,
like
like,
you would
add
have,
in.
because you have a lot of in-person stuff too. Like you'll probably have some really, really
Ooh,
cool.
that'd be kind of cool, like some audience shots. Okay.
Mm.
Let's say next week I'm gonna come back with round 2. So this
Mhm.
is V1 of Chloe makes LinkedIn, because we also discovered, y'all, when you go to the app to upload it, there's different stickers and gifts
Yeah.
that you can add. So like, I think this is meant a sizzle reel, Karen. Yes, that's what it's called, a sizzle reel.
Sizzle reel. Wow, I've never heard of that before.
Yeah, like little like sizzle, little exciting bits and treats from videos. I like this idea of a live audience, and then I'll put in fake laughter right now.
Yes, you have to do that now.
And it's just be like, and thank you for coming to my TED Talk. And it's just like applause. I love that. Okay, new video coming next week for me. Maybe this is a new segment on the show where we like Chloe tries to pick her LinkedIn video. All right.
It's the
Well,
LinkedIn corner. LinkedIn corner.
it's the LinkedIn corner. How can we help with your LinkedIn? Okay, so today's phone screens, we
Mhm.
have some handy dandy links to share. I thought before we dove into these links and treats that we're going to share with the audience, do you have any phone screen success or failure stories, Gwen? I was trying to think of some before this stream.
I have some failures. I
Okay.
have a pretty harsh failure. Like I remember I got a phone screen and it was going pretty well, I thought, and then the person like just pulled up my resume, and I think this was, so it was help desk looking to move into more of like a sysadmin role. So it's still pretty new. Maybe about like 2-3 years into my tech career. And then they pulled up my resume and they were like, "Oh no, 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 no. There's so much wrong here." And just proceeded to flame my resume for
Rude.
solid 20 minutes or so.
What?
Now, to be fair, there were some solid points in there, but it was just I felt destroyed after that. I was like,
Yeah.
I needed to take a quick break after that. Yeah.
That's tough. And also, like, you didn't sign up for that. You're like, I came to talk about the job, not to get roasted
Yeah,
on my
absolutely.
resume.
I've had some where the call itself felt like just like a checklist, like what's your name, where did you find us, blah blah, like that, versus like actually trying to like get like a feel for who I am. But and then I've had some good ones too, like where I was like, oh, like I really did well on those kinds of things. But all of them have been on the phone and I've never done any like on like a Zoom call or things like that. Whereas I feel like I could have gotten more feedback just like by watching the person talk to
Yeah.
me. But yeah, all my phone screens have been on via phone.
I would say so. Phone screens changed drastically after my first role. Like, I would say getting my first role in an engineering role was really tough because I didn't have a lot on my resume that kind of spoke to my experience. And I had to do a lot of kind of selling of myself on the phone. Whereas anybody who's been in the industry, in more than one role knows that, the second or third time's a little bit easier because you can speak
Yeah,
to your experience. It's less of a chicken and an egg thing. It's less like, please, I really need this job. It's like, yeah, I've done this job. Let me tell you like how this works. So I remember vividly, and it's interesting that you say that, Gwen, the whole like checking off the list of questions kind of thing. Because I
Right.
used to be a recruiter. I also used to be an actress, so I can feign enthusiasm pretty well. And I remember getting so disheartened as a junior candidate. I remember I took a call for a developer advocate role. I won't drag the company name, but I could tell like minutes into this call that the recruiter was not interested in me as a candidate. Like clearly, and I think it's important to say, in these kind of situations, that's not on you as a candidate. Like if a recruiter or a hiring manager has done their due diligence, they've looked at your resume, they understand, maybe you were referred into this role, maybe they read your cover letter, which we so carefully crafted on our last episode. But I'm right there with you. I very much feed off of other people's energy. So when I'm in those situations where I can tell the person on the other end of the line like wants nothing to do with me, it's hard to like kind of like pick yourself back up from that.
Yeah, getting through the entire call is like, I've had those where they're like just painful from the start, and I'm like, why am I even doing this? Like you have to put in so much more energy. But then that's in a way that's, if that's like your first call, it's like, oh, do you really want to follow through with the rest of this process if like the first call was not the best vibe.
Yeah.
But you mentioned that phone screen, like your history with them has changed a lot, right? Obviously, as you advance in your career. But early, we had this comment here. I think Clifton mentioned that the sort of like the job hunting scene was completely different. I was wondering if you could sort of tell us a couple of things, what has changed. I can't remember like how was interviewing or job searching in 2012.
So I will say, as far as technical engineering roles, I didn't start interviewing until 2016. But what I can say is a positive thing that I've even seen from 2016 to 2021, because I mentor a lot of folks who are interviewing. I help out with a lot of whiteboarding sessions and stuff. I would say that the industry as a whole, with maybe the exception of some major FANG companies out there, like, you're still going to have to go to certain companies, whiteboard, do a reverse system design engineering interview, of course. But it's been my experience as someone who has not only interviewed folks, but been interviewed, that nowadays there's a little less of the like, invert this binary tree.
Yeah.
Thank the gods above, because I just don't thrive in those kind of environments, and more like, hey, let's talk through a project that you've worked on, and like, okay, why did you make this decision? Let's like fix this bug together. That kind of stuff, I think, especially in roles where it is more collaborative, and there are a lot of companies now that do a lot of pair programming stuff. I'm very excited to see more of those collaborative interviews, or even just realistically doing a whiteboarding interview, which, like, Gwen, you're an engineer, like, when have you ever had a situation where you have no access to like Bing or Google or anything to like look for a certain formula or a way to solve something, right?
It's like our daily job.
Exactly. So
Google's
what I have found to be very cool is, even in the time between my very first interview and like my second or third interview for a technical role, that I tended to see the interviews were less like solve for X and more like, hey,
How do you think?
how do you think about this? Oh yeah, I think there is a formula for that. Let's search for that together. Okay, cool. Like, and I think that's also something as you interview to even, you can ask those questions like, hey, well, what will this technical interview be? Is there any materials that I should look at ahead of time to prepare for this? Because interviewing as an engineer is like not like our day-to-day jobs, and people take months, if not, years to study to get back on the horse for that.
It's an entire process in itself to like interview, right?
Yeah.
Like we spoke about this the other day, that people will it could be like a full-time job just finding work, right? Here's a interesting comment. I was in a phone screen interview where the recruiter wasn't interested in me, and I was put off by the culture of the company, and we were mutually not interested in the 20-minute call. Yeah, see, I like this because the emphasis on mutually. Because remember, it's a job that you're going to be doing, so it's like it has to work for you just as much as it works for them, right?
Absolutely.
Keep
And I
that in
think
mind.
that's very much like when I think about those moments where I'm just like, you're kind of stuck in them, right? Where you're just like, what do I do? I'm on this call and I have to like get through it. I have to get to the other side, and it's awkward. And yeah, it's never fun.
Mike says this here. I despise questions that start with "Tell me about a time you." And I was wondering if you have any. Do you have any memories of like just interesting questions or maybe weird questions you've been asked on a phone screen?
Ooh, yes. Okay. So I definitely. So, okay. I used to get a lot of questions about like, tell me a time that you blank, right? And especially when I was a junior candidate and didn't have any previous experience as a developer relations person, it was really hard to answer those questions, or even some kind of like questions about, tell me about a time you led a team, things like that, because I hadn't managed at that point. However, I was able to kind of, after a couple interviews and getting some experience and knowing what kind of questions I was going to get asked, be able to answer these with some previous experience that I had from being an actress. So, like, for example, I had not put together, a meetup for a community event per se, which was like a question I was getting often with like, tell me about a way that you work with the community or you have organized community events. Clearly had not run a technical meetup before, but I was able to speak to previous parts of my life where I was like, you know what, I wrote and directed and produced my own show, and here's like how I worked with like the technical team to do this, and then I was able to like work with the marketing team to do this. There's kind of previous stories that I took from different pieces of my background. I think the coolest example that I've seen of this actually wasn't even with myself. It was with someone that came to our Microsoft Reactor bootcamp office hours, and he was a former military person, and he was able to speak as, you know, the leader of a group in the military, to like what leadership was and how he, you know, delegates tasks to people and how he works efficiently with people. So I'm trying to think of like a weird or a strange one. I have gotten like, I would say, questions about like, you know, those kind of negative questions are always kind of awkward, right? Where it's like, tell me about a time you disagreed with someone, or tell me
Or
about a
tell me your
time.
worst quality or something like that.
Yeah. Or like, but then you'll get some fun ones in there, like, if you had a superpower, what would your superpower be? So you kind of have to like think on your feet a little bit for like any and all questions.
I was once asked, so you come home and you turn on your lights and it doesn't work. What's the first thing you do? Like your light
Oh.
doesn't turn on.
That's really interesting. I
Yeah.
like that question.
And I was like, oh, give me a second to think about it, because I wasn't prepared for anything like that, right? So I asked, well, is it, well, like, what's the time of day? And they're like, let's assume it's like the nighttime. And I'm like, okay, well, I guess I would check the street lights first. And then they asked, like, why would you check the street lights? I'm like, well, if the street lights aren't on and it's nighttime, then it seems to be like more of like powers out in the area. If the street lights are on, I'll go in and I'll try to turn on another light. If that works, then all right, then it's in this specific like room that I turned on the light.
And was this a technical interview? Were they just like trying to hear you talk through how you problem solve? I love this question, actually.
This was like a phone screen. It was a smaller company, so perhaps it could have been considered as like the first interview, but it was over the phone, and they were like, yeah, I just want to know how you kind of like walk through like solutions and things like how you figure things out. And I'm like, well, I'm always gonna start with like try to like the most obvious. I'm not gonna try to like dig deep. And then later on, I became friends with this person who like did the interview, and they're like, yeah, most people will answer like, oh, I'll just go change the light bulb. But it's like, well, how do you know if the light bulb's the actual issue, kind of thing. So that was an interesting question that I got once.
I like that one. I'm gonna have to like steal that one as a question that I ask people. Let's see.
Yeah.
I just realized that I think I did the wrong number for our link. So we'll just make note of it. I'll put our link on the screen here. This is technically episode 6, but I put 7, but it's fine. We'll swap them for the next one.
It's fine. We got some interesting comments here. If it's a recruiter reaching out from LinkedIn, I started asking for a written job description first before agreeing to a phone screen, so I don't waste my time.
Yeah,
I like that. Respect your time.
Because I totally agree here, Karen, because there's sort of this like weird middle conversation of like, hey, here's the job and here's what it is. Are you interested? And it's like, this call could have been an email.
Yeah.
Like, just give me the information up front. I love that. Just completely saving time for you and the company, because it's valuable time for both of you.
Yeah, absolutely. Mike said he's going to steal that. I feel like there was a comment up here that I might have, maybe not. Oh, I like this. Fake it till you make it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, fake it as much as you can. It is a little hard to fake reversing a binary tree.
Yeah, probably can't fake that.
I was asked to whiteboard my strategy to develop a World of Warcraft clone at a front-end engineer job interview. 7 hours wasted at that interview. Oh, no.
What?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because for those reverse system design, kind of calls, it can be anything from like build Slack, build, LinkedIn, like tell me how you would build this. And sometimes, you need to get led to what they're really asking for, which is like, okay, are they trying to figure out, how to efficiently use the storage in this situation? Am I trying to explain sort of how I would, use metadata on a user, for example?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, oh my gosh. I've never played World of Warcraft, so I would not do good at that question.
Yeah, I'm like 7 hours wasted at that interview. Yeah, that's, oof.
And that's another thing I think we should address on the show is if you've never interviewed in a technical engineering role, they're typically like a 6 or 7 hour back-to-back. If it's on site, there's typically a lunch. Now during the pandemic, I imagine there's some sort of like, break, lunch break for yourself to hang out. But yeah, it's a lot of work.
I once interviewed for a big tech company. I'm not going to say who.
Okay.
but they wanted
Dragon.
they wanted me to come in over the course of a month for one day sessions, but I think each day would have been like 4 hours.
That just feels like unpaid labor at that point.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
like
Large tech company. Yeah. You. And then I was like, yeah, I'm not gonna move forward with this. This is no.
I remember a company when I was a junior. I won't drag them. I won't drag them. It was a map company. It was not Google Maps. But there was a company that for part of if you moved past your on-site, so like you know how the typical kind of like chain of command is like, okay, you submit your resume, you have a phone screen, then you have an on-site or a virtual on-site, and then maybe there's a final call with the CEO, maybe if it's a startup or something, right? The fourth step for this interview was after you did your onsite, if they liked you and everything was like, great, we really like Gwen, then they would fly you to a location and you would work on site with them for a week and then they would decide if it was a good match. And I was like, oh my gosh, I feel like my heart would be ripped out of my chest if I did go work with them for a week and then they were like, we don't like you.
Wow, that's a lot of
yeah,
investment in like
a
an
big
interviewing
investment
process.
to like fly them out as well. Just like I was like, wow. But also I was like, I want to fly somewhere cool. This is before I used to travel for work.
Yeah.
I brought up this article here, Gwen, that you found. That we are sharing the link for below in our little banner, and this is interview tips for all roles, all of the roles. And I like these little subsections that they have here because this is like kind of what we were talking about earlier about, oh, this is great. We should have mentioned this. Do your research about the company. Like, like, let's say you're working at a company that sells phone stands that are shaped like a rabbit. Like, maybe know a little bit about that space before you kind of waltz in there and explain how you can be helpful.
Right.
How do you typically research a company? Like, do you just go to their website or what do you do to kind of prepare, Gwen?
Yeah, I'll always go to their website first, and then I'll do some LinkedIn stalking, and take a look at if there's people there that have posted things or, really anything, and get a feel for if they have a company LinkedIn as well, and like what kind of if they're active, what kind of stuff are they sharing. And those things. Social media for sure. If they have a presence on Instagram, they have a presence on Twitter, all those kinds of things. And kind of just get a feel for what they do and read if they have a mission statement or something like that. Also read that. Overall, just get a feel for what they do, what kind of stuff they've shared, and I need to be able to like go and answer the question like, why do you want to work for us?
I don't know if this is like a real scientific statistic, but I've definitely like heard people say this or seen it tweeted. So take this with a grain of salt. But isn't there some sort of science behind like the way that you get along with your coworker? Like, first of all, that you spend more time with your coworkers than you do your family typically, especially back in physical times.
Yeah.
But also like your mental health is more affected by your manager and your coworkers more than like your significant. I don't know. I read something about this recently, and I think like that's something to keep in mind when you're interviewing with a team. Like, let's say you're working on the coolest, newest technology in the world, and you're like, oh my gosh, I love Rust. I love Rust so much. All I want to do is learn Rust all day.
I got no time for anything else. I gotta learn Rust.
I don't have time for anything. I just need to learn Rust right now. And you get hired at a Rust, full stack Rust shop, and then you don't get along with anyone, and then you're like working on your dream. It's like working at Disneyland, but everybody's mean. Like, it would not be fun, right?
Exactly.
So you really got to kind of figure out like, is this a place, and are these people, and is this a company that I align with? Like, if you are really into like, I don't know, a certain activist cause, like, does this align with what you believe in? Oh, I love this message from Brendan North. That said, can't stay today, but I just want to say thank you, Chloe and Gwen, for this series. I just got typed out by an automated system and then called back because someone decided my resume was worth a second glance. Yay! We love to see it. We love to see it. See, people are learning.
Oh, look at this. And I'm fully confident that would not have happened before the edits I made watching this.
We're so glad,
Love
Brendan.
it.
That's
Love
so
it.
exciting. We're so glad we could be helpful. How can we help? Tell us how. Okay, let's see. Okay, good. We've got time. Next one here is know our core competencies. Interview will include competency-based questions as well as questions about your resume. Ooh, yes, don't lie on your resume. I mean, we covered that on resumes, I think, explicitly, but like, make sure that what you put on there you can actually do, because this is a moment where they're going to ask you, hey, those things that you said you can do, can you do them?
Yeah, I feel like the phone screen, like I feel like the first question is always like, tell me about yourself, and I think that's like the best way where you can just walk through your resume, like be able to speak through your resume, and but don't just like list, don't just read out, all right, I did this in 2012, like don't do that, right? But make sure they match, make sure your stories match,
And I think also like getting that in a succinct way, because truly, if I wanted to go through every job I ever had, I'd be like, once upon a time, I walked into the Disney store and I was like, can I work here? You don't need to cover everything. Obviously, cover what's relevant and get them up to speed to like, why are you here? Why are you in my office? Kind of answer.
It's interesting that you mentioned cover what's relevant, because how we talked about how you should tailor your resume, tailor your cover letter. You should also be tailoring the way you approach your phone screen interviews.
Yes, like highlight what's relevant and important. Like, it's funny, we were talking on the last episode about the drone thing, how like I applied for this drone company and I was like, here's a video of me with the drone. If I did that for every company I applied for, like I'd be like, hi Fitbit, like here's a picture of me in my Fitbit, like
just go out and buy the product.
And I think, especially by the time you get to the phone screen, you want to make sure you've done your due diligence and like you understand what this product is. I love this one here that's like, so I guess this is specific for Microsoft because it's saying customer focus. Our mission at Microsoft is to empower every person and every organization to achieve more. And to someone who doesn't work at Microsoft, that's like, okay, it's like a lot of jargon. But as an interview person being interviewed, you can be like, ooh, I really want to make sure that I cover in my phone screen that it's really important to me that, X people, like for me personally, that's like, I believe that anybody should be able to get access to like programming knowledge. Like that's a big thing for me. So like you can speak to that in your interview, or like down here they have adaptability, adapting to deal with ambiguous and uncertain situations or problems with agility. This is a really great time to think of stories and be like, ooh, I want to talk about a time that I was working on a project. Someone told me no. I was able to use data to like prove otherwise. Like you can talk about these maybe successes or highlights that you have in your career that cover things like collaboration, putting customers first, customer focus, results. I know for you, Gwen, you probably have a lot of stories about adaptability and change, like dealing with change from working in IT, and like that's got to come with its own stories to share.
Absolutely. One thing I want to mention with what I have noticed in the difference between like getting started at interviewing and where it's at now is like there seems to be a heavier focus on like making sure you're aware of the culture of like the role that you're coming into and the company that you're coming into, and like it's more important, right? Like to identify that you are like a great fit in terms of the culture, which is great because like you mentioned, it's like you're going to spend a lot of time here. Like you need to make sure that it's not just all about the tech and that kind of stuff.
That's a great segue to accelerate our culture. Because I think this is so interesting, right? Like you could literally, most websites for startups, large companies, big companies are going to have an about page. Let's just let's look at one. Let's look at my good old alma mater, Sentry.io, because I think they're great and they have a great jobs page. So like if you go to an about page, you can get a good feeling about like what is it like to work here. And I'm like, oh, this picture is cool. Like, okay, all right. With Sentry's, developer around the world can save time, energy, and probably a few therapy sessions. I'm like, they have a sense of humor. That's great.
Yeah.
Here's all the information I need. Like, how many rounds have they raised? Do they hire remotely? Cool. Who are the people behind this? So like, you can learn a lot about the product just from an about page. Like,
yeah, absolutely.
5 minutes on an about page can tell you everything you need to know.
You know what I like is sometimes sites will have like just a page for their team, and sometimes the team will have like a couple of one-liners that they describe themselves. I like that too. Just reading through like what people have written about themselves.
Like this, like here's quotes from people who worked there. Here's all the perks and benefits. People love working here. Blah blah blah. Here's like you said, actual pictures. Here's them. What I loved about Sentry, and one of the reasons I interviewed here back in the day, was they also had pictures of their cats and their animals and their profile picture. So I thought
Love it.
that's so fun. I want to meet these people. This person has 2 animals. And you can actually get a feel. And what was cool back in the day is when I worked at Sentry, each new employee recorded a GIF, like a special GIF that was their welcome GIF. And that was
Mhm.
that told me a lot about who I would be working with and what the company would be. So, even just from a page like this, you can learn a lot. You're like, oh, wow, these seem like, people I want to work with. Or you can take a look at the page and be like,
Born to
this is
shine.
not where I want to work. Born to shine. Yes.
Hi, Mom. I'm on a website.
I'm on a website. I don't know what mine said. I think mine said something about LaCroix, probably, now that I think back on it. But it really, you can get a feel for who are these people? Who am I going to be working with? Also a feature that I will recommend, and this works a little bit better at companies that are smaller. So if you go to someone's profile, so let's say that I go here, we'll do Sentry again because we're just doing Sentry. If you click on the company name, you can
Mhm.
actually see other people who work there, see if you have any
Yeah,
connections.
I do this. Yeah.
And I love this because you can be like, oh, great, I have 29 connections here because I worked here. But I could ask someone here, hey, are you hiring for this team? That's really going to get your foot in the door.
I've definitely messaged people like, hey, I see you work here. I was wondering if I, just could ask you some questions about, prepping for this or whatever. Sometimes people did respond, sometimes it didn't. I've made friends that way, future colleagues that way too. But
your mileage will vary. Something like Microsoft is going to be pretty gigantico, right?
Yeah.
It's just
Mhm.
okay. I work here, so I have a lot of connections here. But I think that's such a great way to just even just get a feel for the culture from someone that you know and trust who works there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's see. So here's accelerator culture. So here, Microsoft growth mindset is a really big thing. So I felt like when I interviewed at Microsoft, that was a question of kind of how do you grow from experiences and things like that. Kind of think ahead to what these questions can be from a page that says here's our core values. You're like, ooh, it says that communication is a core value. Maybe I should have a story about a time I communicated really well.
Yeah, well, that's the. I wanted to bring up this comment. I always dread technical interviews because I get nervous.
Yeah.
And my answer to this and to every step, starting from from the first time you communicate with a company for a role, which would usually the first one is typically a phone screen, maybe an email, is you have to practice. You might think oh, it's just a phone screen, I'll just wing it. Trust me, if you practice, you put in I don't know, sometimes I used to say things out loud, say I remember this one time where I had a difficult customer like that, and I would speak to the story to make sure it would make sense. That way when I was on the call, I could be able to say it without getting stuck on things or not having examples to bring up. But yeah, practice will I wouldn't say makes perfect in this case, because I don't think you can be perfect on a phone screen interview.
But you also want to put yourself in the best light, right? So
exactly.
You're maybe there's a way to tell this story that better features because I can tell a story about a time that I did X to achieve X, but maybe I'm oh, you know what? I know that this company really values communication, so I want to make sure that I emphasize, how I communicated with the stakeholders on this project or something like that.
You gotta
get the
tailor it.
version
Yeah,
of the story.
Love it.
Envision your future. I like this where it's we encourage you to have a vision beyond the role you're applying for. At Microsoft, you can kind of think here's where I want to see myself in X amount of time. But here's the section I like the most during the interview: be yourself. I totally agree with this.
Cliche,
and I think
but so true.
This speaks to my LinkedIn video, right? I feel like my LinkedIn video is very much a representation of me and who I am. So authenticity, people can tell when you're being yourself and you're being authentic. Demonstrate your thinking and curiosity, which that's why I loved that question that you said earlier about so your lights are off in your apartment, where do you start? It's
Yeah.
all right, do you call someone? Do you go outside? Do you figure that out? And then be specific, which this is such a great, okay, everybody write this down. The STAR model. STAR R model.
STAR R.
This will help you create clarity and structure in your response. Okay, so let's practice this. So
Ooh, I like this.
Situation, task, action, result, reflection. Okay, I'm going to think of a sitch. Let's see. What's a situation that I had? Okay. Let's do okay. So Gwen and I had a situation 2 weeks ago where we couldn't do a live stream with the reactor because there was a loud announcement in my apartment that there was a
Mhm.
gas leak. And we had a choice. The task was we had to do this live stream. We had to make a decision between Chloe taking the call from the street in an elevator or telling our viewers like, hey, we need to reschedule this and giving them a better experience. So the action that we took is we worked with the lovely Dion, who helps us with our shows, to communicate to our viewers that we had to postpone the stream. We put the communication out on social media. Our result is that Chloe didn't die in a gas fire, and we ended up doing the show on the next episode and reflecting. I'm glad that I was safe and I evacuated the building, although it was annoying to do. The end. Like I feel like that's like the that's a good piece of like that's how you should just format every story is the star R method.
I like that. I like that. And for those questions, for those tell me about a time one questions, you gotta go.
Yeah.
You gotta have those story examples in the bag. This is like a great model for you to like go, figure out some of those answers and put them in this way. This is great. I wish I had this when I was
Star
doing
R.
Star.
Do you want to try a star R? Do you want to tell us a story with star R?
I'm just trying to think of like a situation I would have brought up when I was like earlier on to like the
Maybe
hiring
like a
process
grumpy person at the Apple store.
at an Apple store. Okay. I'll try to keep it generic because there was like so many. All right. So the situation was I was checking in customers and the person came out to me wanting to have their phone fixed right away. But if you're aware of an Apple store, you have to have an appointment because it's like the most exclusive place ever for some reason. I don't know. Like, let's not get into that. So the task was, all right, I had to communicate to this person some bad news because I tell them like, you can't just get your phone fixed right away. You gotta have an appointment. So I then proceeded to communicate that to this person, but I didn't tell them like, we can't just do this for you. It's like, all right, this is what's going on. But hey, we have these options for you. I can put you in our sort of like walk-in queue. Might be an hour. Give me your number. Walk around them. Luckily, we were in a mall, so they could like walk around and shop a little.
Get a pretzel.
Get a pretzel.
Chill.
Just we'll text you when you need to come back. And the result was the customer was upset, but they understood that. All right, I'll go kill some time. And looking back at it, I started to handle and so like a reflection. I started to handle all my situations where it's like, let me always have some sort of options so it's not like, oh no, we can't do anything for you. It's like, let me make sure I always have like backup, like, okay, yeah, we have some bad news, but this is what we can do. And that's how I handled situations after that.
I love that. And I love this method, and I wish that I had known about it when I was interviewing because I tend to I have ADHD, so when I tell a story, I'm like, oh, and then this happened and this happened. So I feel like even if you just put on a Post-it, like situation, task, action, result, reflection, and just like put it in your peripheral and kind of reference it when you walk through a story, I feel like that could just be a really good best practice, like a good reference.
Absolutely.
This is a great article. We have a couple other articles to share, which I'll put up on the screen as well, real quick in the minute or two. We'll maybe go a minute over here. We also have this: how to prepare for a virtual interview that has a bunch of resources. Which I'm going to share the link to that as well. But this is saying, prior to your virtual interview, signing an NDA. This is pretty common. How to prep on the day of your interview as well. Here's a question for you. Did you, for this current role, Gwen, did you apply all remotely?
Yeah.
How was that experience for you?
I was extremely nervous. I was like making sure on the camera, like, oh, let me check my angles. Am I looking, how does the shirt look like? Am I nice and clear? Like all that kind of
Sure.
Like no one make any noise for 6 hours.
Right.
Yeah, but it was great. I still got to like see, the people who were interviewing me, their faces, and what was cool is like they also they were in a quiet environment and like there wasn't like anything distracting going on and things like that. So overall, it was pretty great.
Yeah. Ooh, I will have to check out this. Look inside our virtual interview process. I'm very intrigued about this dog. This is very
But
cute.
to ask, what is that?
So that link for this prepare for virtual interview is aka.ms/how can I help links 7b. And I would say like all of these these two articles that we're sharing, they're specific to Microsoft, but they can be applied to like any, like these tips are valid for anything. Like even I would say a big thing that, especially if you're not used to the whole process of interviewing remotely, test your sound and your microphone. Hop into the call like 15 minutes early.
Always.
Just a sanity check, because Gwen and I, for our job, are often doing sound and microphone checks, and we do this every single day, and we have issues. So especially when you have a very limited amount of time for an interview or a phone screen, make sure the headset you're using works. Do a test call with a friend or a relative. That's also very helpful.
Absolutely. Definitely. Well, it looks like we're almost up. We have one more link, right?
Yes, the last one here is
Cool.
aka.ms/how can I help links 7c, and this is going to take you to how to prepare for your Microsoft interview technical interviews. So this is probably a really good resource for our whiteboarding session that we will be doing next week. I'm out next week, but we will have a understudy in.
Next week is on-site, right?
Wait, is next week on site?
On-site, then whiteboarding.
Okay.
I think. I'm pretty
We're
sure.
figuring it out. I might be out.
I'll be here, though. I'll be here.
But Gwen will be here. And this is going to be good kind of homework for anybody who wants to dive into this a little bit earlier. This looks like I'm seeing a whiteboard here, so I'm assuming this is going to be some whiteboarding.
Some homework.
And any final thoughts as we end this episode on phone screens?
Be yourself. Practice those scenarios, those questions that you get. Do your research. Tailor your responses. Follow the STAR R model. But most importantly, don't forget that it's like a two-way thing. You're also evaluating if the role is in the company is a good fit for yourself, and make sure that you do have questions to ask. Because I think like the most wasted opportunity during a phone screen is like when they ask you, do you have any questions? And you're like, no. It's like you have to have some sort of questions.
I think that's a secret trick that like nobody talks about, where for a long time in my career, it's not that I thought asking questions was a sign of weakness. I was like, oh, I don't want to like waste any of their time. But asking questions is in itself a question. You know what
Absolutely.
I'm saying? Like them asking, do you have any questions for me, is your opportunity to ask a question and have them go, wow, that's a really good question. And like think about questions that particularly will showcase that you've done your research on the company. Like let's say it's an error logging and reporting tool like Sentry. You can be like, tell me about how you log, like, I was looking at your website and I couldn't figure out how to do X. Tell me how you think about this. Or like have it be, don't like, the more specific you can get, I think shows that you care, shows that you've done your due diligence and you've researched.
Absolutely. Or if you have any questions that come up during the call, like leave them towards the end. Like it makes them understand more that you're like really paying attention to the conversation, which also is good for you.
Yeah. Well, that is the end of our show for today, y'all. We are going to play out with our music, but as always, if you have any questions in the meantime, we are on Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, all the things. Feel free to ask any questions about phone screens, anything like that. And now we will take it away with some jams.
Bye everyone.